Death is a constant companion when exploring the lands between. Time and again we find ourselves on the wrong end of a pointy weapon, crushed by enormous monsters, or falling to our end due to a poorly planned jump. While we become awfully familiar with death through our journey, the land itself rejects the idea of death, at least in any natural way. Without the rune of death, true death does not exist in the lands between. Age cannot cause one to expire, and we see many wandering nobles shambling through fields looking as if they themselves have already become cadavers. No, in this land, the only form of death is more like being recycled to feed the Erd tree and be born anew. However, there are remnants of what the world may have been like, long before the rune of death was removed from the Elden Ring. There exists a time well before the Golden Order when a different ritual was practiced for those who passed on. Long ago, the duty of ushering souls into the next life belonged to the Deathbirds and those that followed them, burning the bodies of their dead in ghost flame. Today, we will explore the history of the Deathbirds and their enduring presence in the lands between. Thank you for joining us during our spooky season specials here at Scary Terror Gaming. If you like our content and explorations of the lore of Elden Ring, please consider subscribing to the channel. With every subscription, this incredible community we've been able to cultivate grows a little bit larger, so why not join us? We also have a Discord if you'd like to talk about your favorite spine-tingling FromSoft theories. Whether you join us or not, we're glad to have you for today's video, and with that said, let's dive back into this exploration of the Birds of Death. Any conversation about the Deathbirds needs to start by tracing their history back as far as possible. They are strongly associated with Ghost Flame, as the sorcery Explosive Ghost Flame mentions them by name. Sorcery of the Servants of Death. Strike the ground with the staff, triggering an explosion of ghost flame that burns the surrounding area. In the time where there was no Erd tree, death was burned in ghost flame. Deathbirds were the keepers of that fire. This outlines for us that ghost flame, and by extension the Deathbirds, existed long before the Erd tree came to prominence, and the use of this flame in burial rituals was the norm. Ancient death rancor can add even more context here. Sorcery of the Servants of Death summons a horde of vengeful spirits that chase down foes. They are cinders of the ancient death hex, raked from the fires of ghost flame by Deathbirds. Indeed, this concept of the dead being burned in ghost flame and raked by the Deathbirds can be seen in many places, and their weapon itself is known as Death's Poker. Barbed rod carried by Deathbirds, the birds are graveyard firekeepers. It is said they rake out the ashen remains of the dead from their kilns. It is clear from these descriptions that the Deathbirds served an essential purpose: to protect the fires of the ghost flame and act as stewards to those who needed to have their dead burned and ushered into the next life, whatever form that may take. Now that we have a clear idea of their purpose in times long since past, there's still the question of where they came from. The twin bird kite shield can shed some light on this question. Shield featuring a vividly painted twin bird. The twin bird is said to be the envoy of an outer god and mother of the Deathbirds. At dwindling levels of HP, this shield slightly boosts both attack and defense. According to the shield, the twin bird is the envoy of an outer god, much as Marika is to the Elden Beast, and the Deathbirds, as its children, could be likened to the demigods. Interestingly, even though the Deathbirds are likely thousands of years older than anything we see in the lands between, their skulls resemble those of young robins. You would expect these birds of death to be associated with ravens, a bird often tied to death, but the shape of their skull and beak don't line up well with these particular birds. The fact that they look like infant bird skulls as well bolsters the idea that they are the children of the twin bird. Those that are left in the lands between don't seem to have reached maturity, likely due to their religion falling out of favor and the Golden Order shunning death outright. It's possible they didn't always look skeletal. Perhaps in their prime, the Deathbirds look closer to their mother, the Twin Bird, with an almost phoenix-like appearance. But time and a lack of bodies to feed their kilns has warped their appearance, leaving them nothing more than some stretched back skin and bone. We need only look at the sacrificial axe to shed light on what these birds may have once looked like. Hatchet used in an ancient sacrificial rite, a Deathbird is depicted as a malevolent deity. The power of the rite yet lingers. A small amount of FP is restored upon slaying a foe. We'll talk more about this axe later. We believe what's left of the Deathbirds doesn't speak to their true visage due to one important detail: their feathers. When we face the regular Deathbirds, we can see they have somewhat white feathers, but there are 3 items, all utilizing different colored feathers that are associated with the Deathbirds. The raptor's black feathers is a robe crafted with the black feathers of a bird of prey, worn by the assassins of Ravenmount, a ritual implement for transforming into a Deathbird, if only by imitation. We are birds of prey, bringers of death. Clearly, the Ravenmount assassins thought the Deathbirds originally had black feathers, and the Mausoleum Knights would agree, as by adding these same feathers to their armor, they effectively make themselves unkillable. The winged-shaped ornaments on its back evoke the Deathbird, a self-inflicted curse that ties the spirits of these loyal knights to the land, having willingly beheaded themselves so they may serve their masters in death. However, even with these 2 instances of black feathers being associated with the birds, we also see that the red and blue feather branch swords are both dropped by Deathbirds, and they tell us they are talismans adorned with red or blue feathers, once used in ancient death rituals. The heart sings when one draws close to death, and thus does one cling so tenaciously to life, to render up a death worth offering. Without diving too deeply into Ghost Flame as a concept, those who died clinging to life were burned in the Ghost Flame in some kind of ancient ritual, and these talismans with red and blue feathers are meant to be used in these rituals, which are heavily tied to the Deathbirds. It's likely the Deathbirds themselves did not conduct these rituals. Their job was to clean the kiln so that the Ghost Flame may burn bright, but there were others who actually brought the bodies to the flame. The death ritual spear tells us it is a ritual spear used by priests of old who were permitted to come among the Deathbirds. The priests became guardians of the birds through the rite of death, which also serves as an oath sworn to their distant resurrection. These priests followed the Deathbirds across the lands between, acting as guardians of any who would disturb the work of their deities. They too utilized the Ghost Flame to do this, as their weapon, the death ritual spear, can use the Spear Call ritual to rain spectral ghost spears down onto our opponents. The sacrificial axe likely played a part in their rituals as well, meaning that the sacrificial rite, mentioned in its item description, may have been one way to gather new bodies to be fed to the flame. What's most interesting is that these priests swore an oath that would grant them resurrection after death, much in the way grace can for our tarnished. But as far as we know, the Twin Bird's outer god doesn't have that kind of power or foothold in the lands between. We see how the Deathbird's end of the bargain was upheld when fighting the Deathrite birds. These enemies are unlike the other Deathbirds, as they have large black spectral wings, and within them we can see many death ritual spears. However, if you take a closer look, you'll see that these spears are actually being held by someone, a spirit of some kind. We believe it's no stretch of the imagination to consider these spirits to be those of the priests that dedicated their lives to the Deathbirds. While it may not be how they expected, they were granted everlasting life, but only as a creature of the undead that could help strengthen the Deathbirds by giving them wings and another avenue of attack. The Deathbirds are inextricably tied to the Ghost Flame and death, and they are still well known across the lands between. The raptors use feathers in their armor, and their skeletal mask tells us they are a ritual implement that relentlessly digs into the wearer's face, preserving one's human instincts while dressed in the imitation of the Deathbirds. They even use a unique weapon, the raptor talons, which are a claw comprised of two sharp, thin blades wielded by the assassins of Ravenmount. This weapon allows them to imitate the attacks of Deathbirds. Besides excelling at airborne attacks, its charge attack mimics the vicious swoop of a bird of prey. This shows how the Deathbird's reputation is alive and well, even if the secrets of Ghostflame seem to be lost to the ages. We know the Golden Order despises those who live in death and considers them unnatural, but in truth, their history stretches back to a time when the Deathbirds roamed the land and were worshipped by priests who treated them as deities. When it comes to the Golden Order's hatred of those who live in death, it really boils down to this. The Deathbirds came first. Their burial rites ruled the land. And after the Elden Beast came to the lands between, it needed to stake its claim as an outer god. This may be why we never have a chance to encounter the Twin Bird. This envoy is now long gone, as the outer god it served was forced to leave the lands between, due to the insatiable appetite of the Elden Beast. The old ways of Ghostflame were replaced by honeyed rays of gold, but the raw strength of the Deathbirds ensured they and their dead would remain a thorn in the side of those that serve the Golden Order and feed the never-ending cycle of life and rebirth perpetuated by the Erdtree. The Deathbirds are nothing more than the remnants of a society and a belief system now long dead in the lands between. Where once they stood in prominence with their own priests protecting them and helping them do their sacred work of feeding the ghost flame, now they wander the land, only appearing at night, with no purpose, as their kilns have been replaced by roots, and the dead no longer burn, they are buried. These ferocious birds are a shadow of their former selves, with no mother to guide them, or outer god to hear their prayers. This aside, there is one horrifying thought for those who hunt the dead across this land. If these incredibly dangerous Deathbirds only wield a fraction of the power they once did when they were the prominent form of ritual death in the lands between, what kind of terrifying strength did they possess in their prime? What did you think of our breakdown of the Deathbirds and their mysterious origins? Were the Deathbirds and their ghost flame the oldest form of death and rebirth in the lands between? Did they always look like skeletons, or did they once have the magnificent feathers depicted in the Twin Bird shield? What was the Twin Bird, and what outer god did it serve? Are the Deathbirds in any way attached to the Helfin? And will this be explored in the DLC? Let us know your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss out on any of our lore dives. We look forward to seeing you again for more Elden Lore.